Chi Institute and go.
How would I describe Chi Institute? Let's see. I would describe Chi Institute as a company that's making products that help people to heal themselves, primarily through sound wave technology.
Okay, I like that. And how is it helping you? Or how are the products helping you?
I would say the products are helping me because, well, in my profession, doing strongman, daily body beatdowns, basically, I create a lot of inflammation, a lot of soreness, a lot of damage to the tissue, which, you know, is part of the process of rebuilding and making it stronger. I use the Invertonic and the Vital Rest mostly to promote, you know, blood flow, relief from soreness, increased. I feel that it increases my recovery ability, the speed at which my cells heal, and that way, from one workout to the next, I'm recovered, refreshed, and can put in a full force effort to get the most out of that next workout.
So you were close to the top of your profession about 8 years ago, getting as high as, I guess, 4th or 5th place?
Fifth
place in the world as the world's strongest man.
Yeah.
And set several world records in specific events. And then you fell.
Yeah. You're putting it nicely. Yes.
Yeah. And was it all psychological, or was it injury and at least sort of a combination of things?
Probably a perfect storm of the two.
Okay.
It was psychological fatigue, you know, from just the stress of trying to compete and travel and do that, but then also the stress of trying to constantly recover from one injury or another, which leads into the physical fatigue. My body was just exhausted. And I think, well, for me, most of my strength lies in will and determination.
I think that's true of all of us.
Yeah, I've always said I could get more out of this body than if you put anybody else's brain in this body. I just pushed that little bit extra, and so that got me far, but using it too often, I just felt like it depleted my energy stores, neurotransmitters, neurochemicals, hormones, whatever you want to call it. But being stubborn, I would push through it anyway, and I would compete more, and I'd still go. I still loved it, but then the injuries kind of piled up, and you know, that adrenal fatigue or hormonal fatigue compounded with injuries, compounded with stress at home, and just finally became too much.
I just looked up on the web, half of Americans have a chronic illness, and 95% of the world's population are sick in some way, or have medical problems in some way. I see this as an accumulation that tends to take down athletes, takes down competitors for world's strongest man. And so it's just the force of energies in this world work against us.
Yeah.
And our careful planning, diet, exercise, strategies are working against nature. And so it seems like that whole...
So it's a controlled crash. Nature's going to win eventually, but you can try and hope to steer it into a softest landing spot possible.
Okay, and so we have lots of hospitals for everybody to land in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, we could get into the whole, the theory of why there's so many hospitals, why there's so much health care, how much money is being pumped into that, and then the resulting poor food, poor environment, and that whole cycle that perpetuates itself. But without getting into all of that.
Let me ask the question now. Fast forward to, was it about 2 years ago, when you decided that you were going to come back?
Okay.
Was it 2 years?
It was 3 years in 5 days.
Oh,
6
okay.
days, sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah. So right there at the 3-year mark of being the return.
Okay, so what do you have to do when you used to be at the top of your game, you've gotten older, gotten out of shape, but your mind, tell us about how your mind came back,
It's all right.
your will came back.
As you said, I kind of fell from the top. And in that, it was kind of a dark period. I lost everything. And then, I guess, kept telling myself that it was for a reason. And so, the reboot began when I finally just washed that old life away. Just washed myself of everything. And I left Houston and had plenty of time to think, because it took 10 days to drive to Reno. And just stopped when I wanted to stop, and slept when I wanted to sleep, ate when I wanted to eat. And it was, I guess you could call it a spiritual journey. I got to sit and think and not be interrupted by anybody. I got to wake up looking out over the rim of the Grand Canyon with the sun coming up at me. And some great stuff, but I knew that my heart was still in Strongman. I knew that my heart was still in doing something, great with my life. And I think, when I was going over this in my head, I was trying to come up with examples of people who have made comebacks. Because at this point, it would have been a spectacular comeback to get even close to where I was previously.
At the 3-year ago
At the
point.
3-year ago point.
In the car, driving back to Reno.
Exactly. So, I couldn't find any examples of people who've been able to stage successful comebacks, at least in a solo career sport, or, strongman. I guess boxing has seen some guys come back, but they usually get creamed. I've seen some other strongmen try to make comebacks, and the sport has passed them by. And so I was a little worried about that. But I knew at that point it was just putting one foot in front of the other. And it was kind of like the same mindset of how I get through an injury. Just continue to believe, see where you can be, and then just take the little steps to get there. I always liked this idea. I kept this idea in my head. It was, you can see that end result. You have the goal, the big idea of what you want. And then most people get lost on their way to finding that. So, or they get sidetracked, or they get scared, or they don't think they can ever do it. Well, I always thought, say I'm starting out in New York, and I know LA is over here on this side of the map. That's a long way to go, but I'm driving at night, I got my headlights on, I can see 200 feet in front of me, that's it. But I gotta have faith that that road keeps going, and if I keep following it, I'll get where I need to go. So that's kind of what I apply that to my life, and kept going that 200 feet, having faith that the next 200 feet would be there, and so on and so forth. And I'm right outside LA. I'm not quite there yet, but I think I made most of the journey so far.
So how far have you come, and how far do you have yet to go?
That's kind of a good question, because you never really know how far you have to go, because guys are getting better all the time. So if you want to be the best, that bar is raising continually. But I've come, I can say it's fair to say I've gone at least 90% of the way. And I've gone farther than anybody else I've seen trying to make a comeback so far. It's not quite where I want to be, but it's the best I've seen so far.
Oh, what do you feel your comeback represents? You have a lot of fans, people who are watching you, paying attention to your progress, being aware that you started working against the odds, and you're older, you're in your 30s, which is an older place to start. And so there are a lot of doubts out there. A lot of people who think you just should have had the common sense to give up. What is the theme of your life that you want your fans and other people who see what you're doing now and how far you have come and how far you intend to go? What do you want them to get out of your life?
It's okay. Give me a second on that one.
That big question.
Fans, people that have been watching me. You know, people say all the time, you know, if I only knew then what I know now, I could really do something with whatever. And the reason they say that is because they're older and they're not physically capable of doing what they did back then. I feel like I may be an exception to that. Because I know now, but I'm still capable of doing what I did back then. So I'm armed with that knowledge, and I feel like I can take that as though I were that kid getting that wisdom at an early age and going full force with it. The support that I'm getting from all these old fans and all these old friends that I competed with has been second to none. You know, they're just, I think they're having fun living vicariously, and that kind of motivates me. I feel the energy pushing me. And, you know, of course there's always naysayers and people who don't believe that things can be accomplished.
They actually help.
But yeah, and if you view them as such, they're motivation as well. You know, because it's great to have people on your side. It's great to have people say you can't. Because it's always fun to smack someone in the face with a "told you so." You know what I mean?
The key theme to me is that you have chosen what should be impossible, and you are trying your best. You don't know whether you're going to get there, and the excitement is partly in not knowing. If you had known that you could do it from the beginning, why bother?
Yeah, it'd be kind of boring.
So this kind of, to me, applies to everyone who's watching you and has ever had a dream. The suggestion is it's in the process. It's in getting back in the sport and putting one foot in front of the other, like the trip from New York to Los Angeles. That's life. That's everybody's life. Everybody has a dream and a choice to go forward or to stop and just let life swallow them.
Yeah.
And you're one of these people who stopped, was swallowed by life, and changed your mind.
Crawling out of its stomach and out of its throat last 3 years, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
So-
probably a good analogy. Life swallowed me whole.
Yeah. So a few months ago, you've been working on a variety of scar tissue and different sorts of things to clear out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had the surgery hernia surgery. That was what was left as the weak point in your body.
Mhm.
So you had the surgery. Describe the challenge of the hernia and where you are now.
I think you're right when you say I took the hard road. I don't think I could imagine something more difficult, at least for me, than what I'm doing. And it's
Than
still
just about
maintaining-
anybody in the world.
Well, in maintaining the joy. I mean, I can think of plenty of things that are more difficult that would just make me miserable. You know, working in a tiny little office with no windows or something, that would be very difficult for me. But physically speaking, yeah, it's a tough road, but it's, like you say, the challenge that I find the motivation in.
And the joy.
And the joy, yeah.
The joy
The
of
drive, the joy, everything.
trying, of
Yeah.
doing your best.
And I guess in that, you know, I find a sense of purpose. It lets me live out that purpose. Now, it was about 6 weeks ago, I had a hernia surgery we were talking about. And I think it was one of the few remaining weak points. I'm sure more will pop up throughout my life. But for now, that was one that needed to be fixed. And, you know, I've recovered extremely well from that. And thanks to a couple of the products, the Infotonic and such, 9 days after the surgery, my doctor released me to go resume, he said, resume normal activity, and then caught himself and said, resume normal human activity. So in other words, don't go about your business, but go about everybody else's business. Standing up, walking around, I can do that stuff. But we kind of went over a little bit of a plan. And, you know, at 4 weeks, I was technically allowed to start lifting somewhat heavy again. And I went ahead and waited another week. Just, why not? I'd rather wait another week now than have to go through the whole procedure again in a year or two. You know, so I feel great. I have no pain.
This is a new approach to, rather than move forward a week because you plan, because you can, delay one more week to be solidly reliable in your comeback.
Yeah.
That's really, it takes patience, it takes,
It takes hard-learned lessons.
oh, yeah, and confidence that if you watch yourself, take care of yourself every step of the way, you're gonna get there.
That's definitely something I've learned much later in my career, and more so the last 2 years. I even rushed my first year of getting back into this, and the result was I had 8 pretty nasty injuries within 2 or 3 months. I tore my hamstring, I tore my other hamstring, tore my bicep a little, tore my pec a little. I thought I was falling apart. It's because I was rushing things. I wasn't formulating a plan and then sticking to that plan and having faith in the process, you know, the 200 feet at a time. And I think that's something I've only recently learned. Out of 25 years of lifting, 23 of them were spent beating my head against the wall.
So there's a key thing in here, a key shift in here from the downward spiral where you're injuring yourself over and over again. It's like it's one compounds on another, like people who are heading toward the hospital in life. And then you turned around and your the old injuries, the old weak points in your body, you've been careful with them, but really working them out. It seems like you're repairing them. You're basically building solid new tissue rather than compounding the scar tissue. So,
Yeah, I think you kind of bring up a great point there. Whereas before, it was one injury piled on top of another, and then this rush to get back in and compete and be ready to compete. And I see where that got me. It was compounded to the point where I broke. And then now, rather than continuing that downward trend, yeah, it's more of a rebuilding, a daily rebuilding. I hadn't thought of it like that, though. I like that.
yeah, it just seems like, oh, the way you describe it, all these injuries, hamstring, pec, all the bicep, all these different injuries that you had before were weak points. And it seems like you don't get any pain from any of them anymore. I may be exaggerating, but
No, they're
that's,
pretty good.
it's like the scar tissue has dissolved and turned into normal solid muscle again. So instead of the normal medical model where we go play demolition derby and wind up, I think of an old, my father warned me, don't play football because you'll wind up with, like my fellow, he was a judge, my fellow judges who have chronic illnesses from the injuries they got in high school and college. And here, you're working backwards. You're getting younger.
I think I think you're right on that. I think, especially the last 6 months since I've been using the sound wave technology, the infratonic and the vital rest, I do notice that, and this happens, the more I use it, the better it gets, but I notice that my flexibility, the muscles like pliability, seems to be better. So in other words, it's more shock absorbent. It's more like younger, healthier tissue. It's the muscles break when they become brittle, and it's usually from scar tissue, calcification, stuff like that. And it's it stays there because of poor or restricted blood flow. So I find that the sound wave technology seems to help increase the blood flow, decreases the inflammation, which allows more blood flow and delivery of nutrients. And this is how I see it in my head, is it just takes that old shriveled tissue, which kind of knocks the chunks of dirt and grime off of it, and allows fresh blood to come in with life, essentially.
I've come from a different perspective.
Right.
One of fear, where we injure our body, the muscle says, I've got to save this, and puts together some scar tissue the best it can to patch itself back together.
Yeah.
And the scar tissue holds that fear. The scar tissue is not going to let go because it is saving the muscle.
It was created out of fear. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
Is that fear? Okay.
So the idea is the infratonic technology tends to dissolve the cellular consciousness of fear, of holding, of desperation, and lets the scar tissue more melt and reform.
I guess I kind of see that the same idea is, in a physical way, that tissue kind of forms in a certain way, jumbled up. And I guess that could be that manifestation, physical manifestation of that fear.